Hello and welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd and you were watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today because we're going to be talking about Dmitry Medvedev once again here. So, who is Dmitry Medvedev? He is the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation. He is also the former president of Russia. So, we're talking about Dmitry Medvedev again because this gentleman puts out lots of warnings towards the West, and his warnings in many cases are very dangerous. Okay, sometimes he'll talk about nuclear war and say that, if Ukraine attacks their missile sites, we'll launch a nuke into Ukraine. He's come out so many times and warned of war with NATO and Russia. And we've got him coming out once again and basically claiming there's no more red lines that can be crossed. So this is in response to, if you saw my previous videos, I've done quite a few videos on French President Emmanuel Macron. So he's come out many times and said, we will not rule out Western troops to Ukraine. Okay, we will not rule out anything in terms of support for Ukraine. They're willing to do whatever is necessary to make sure that Ukraine wins this war, and that includes boots on the ground. Okay, so that means NATO troops on the ground fighting in Ukraine against Russians. Now, what would that mean? That would mean that more than likely Russia would declare war on NATO, and now this would be a NATO versus Russia war and no longer just Ukraine versus Russia. So, yeah, we've got him coming out and saying there's no more red lines. And why does he say that? Well, we had Emmanuel Macron come out and said there's no more red lines. There are no more limits in terms of supporting Ukraine. And basically, Medvedev said that, well, if you're going to come out and say that, then we're going to say the same thing. Well, you know what? There's no more red lines left for France. Okay, if France crosses another red line, that's it. There's basically no red line. So if they do anything provocative, it's war. Okay, it's war, Russia versus France, and then obviously that would include NATO. So Medvedev is coming out and basically saying we're willing to go to war if that's how you want to play this here. So I have this is a Twitter post or an X post, if you want to call it X or Twitter, whatever, from Dmitry Medvedev. He came out and said, Macron has said there are no more red lines. There are no more limits in terms of supporting Ukraine. Then that means Russia has no more red lines left for France. Okay, so Dmitry Medvedev definitely, he's always got some fiery speech to throw back at somebody every single time we get someone coming out like Emmanuel Macron stating that, they're willing to go to war with Russia, basically, is basically what they're saying. They're willing to go to war with Russia. He will always come out and just hammer fist somebody with some crazy statement. So many people think that, Dmitry Medvedev is like a fearmonger or warmonger, whatever it might be. And in a lot of cases, he does speak that way. I will agree to that. But at the same time, he was a former president of Russia. So he obviously is very loyal to Russia and will do whatever it takes to defend the country just as much as Vladimir Putin would, right? So he's basically a major ally to Vladimir Putin, the current president of Russia. So let me show you this. This is off of Newsweek. Putin ally warns France that Russia has no more red lines. So let's go into this. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev on Thursday warned France that Russia has no more red lines for the country. Medvedev, who was head of the state between 2008 and 2012 and currently serves as deputy chairman of the Russia Security Council, made the comment in a message posted on X, formerly Twitter. His warning was directed at French President Emmanuel Macron, who earlier in the day reaffirmed Paris's firm support for Kiev in its war against Russia's invading forces, while meeting with France's other party leaders at the Élysée Palace. Reported that after the meeting, Fabien Roussel, National Secretary of the French Communist Party, said Macron had expressed how France's position has changed regarding the war and that there are no more red lines and there are no more limits. So obviously, Macron has come out and said some very dangerous comments that obviously he's speaking truth here, and it's something that he would actually be willing to do. He'd be willing to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. Okay, he'd be willing to go to war with Russia. So Medvedev is coming out and countering that and saying, if that's what you want, if you want to go to war with us, we're willing to do that. Medvedev addressed the report from the French newspaper in a threatening ex-post. Macron has said there are no more red lines, there are no more limits in terms of supporting Ukraine. That means Russia has no more red lines left for France, Medvedev wrote. The Kremlin official then added, in hostem omnia licita, a Latin phrase that roughly translates as everything is legal if it is done to an enemy. So I'm assuming they're talking about Russia, or excuse me, French or France, I should say, being enemies to Russia, that everything is on the table, basically. They'd be willing to launch whatever it might be, whatever kind of attack onto France. I would assume even nuclear attack as well would be launched onto France, and they would consider it a legal attack if they're an enemy. Newsweek reached out to Macron's office via email on Thursday night for a comment, and it says here, earlier this week, Macron walked back on comments he made a week earlier that were widely interpreted to mean he supported sending NATO soldiers into Ukraine to fight against Russia. Nothing should be excluded, the French president said, following a gathering of Ukraine's backers in Paris on February 26th. We will do anything we can to prevent Russia from winning this war. His comments drew support from some NATO leaders, while the Kremlin issued a statement that declared such a move could lead to a direct conflict between NATO and Russia. Speaking to the press on February 27th, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Western troops becoming involved in the war would result in the inevitability of a direct confrontation. He did come out and say that as well. In that case, it's not going to be about probability, but inevitability. That's how we assess it. Peskov said when asked about the probability of a direct conflict between NATO and Russia if Western troops are sent to Ukraine, according to the Kremlin-controlled outlet TASS. So what we do know right now, I just reported on this the other day, that for sure there's British troops inside of Ukraine firing British Storm Shadow missiles right now inside of Ukraine. We've got 2 reports off of that. There was German Chancellor Olaf Scholz who came out and said that during a conference. He got lots of backlash and fire underneath him for what he said there. And then we also had this leaked German phone call between two military officers, German officers, that were discussing war inside of Ukraine and saying that British troops were on the ground in Ukraine firing missiles. So we've got reports of that already and proof that there's already troops there in Ukraine right now. Medvedev, a longtime close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, is known for making inflammatory statements, often involving threats of nuclear war. In January, he went so far as to threaten a nuclear strike on Ukraine if Kiev attacked missile launch sites on Russian territory. So that, just like I said there, he does make very inflammatory statements, okay? Very provocative and fiery rhetoric style statements. This is very common coming from Dmitry Medvedev, but at the same time, like I said, he's a former president of Russia, and he's also a very close ally to Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin, obviously, their plan is to take over Ukraine. They want Ukraine to become part of Russia and absorbed into the Russian Federation. That is their plan. He did come out as well saying that. I had some information here showing that he was basically saying that Ukraine is part of Russia. Okay, he said that in a speech recently, that Ukraine is Russia. He literally said that Ukraine is Russia. So obviously the Russians are very serious about this war here in Ukraine. And if you really think about it, neither side wants to lose this war. But at some point, if this war doesn't drag on for another decade, which Dmitry Medvedev did warn of that as well, this war is going to end at some point. And when it does end, it's either going to be Western territory in a way, or it's going to be Russian territory. Whose territory is it going to be? And neither side is going to be willing to give up this territory. So just as Dmitry Medvedev said, there's no more red lines. I really think that's where we're at here. Because throughout this entire war for the last 2 years, there's been lots of red lines that were crossed. Okay? Just F-16s, for example, going to Ukraine. Those are going to Ukraine very soon. But Russia's come out many times in the past at the very beginning of the war and said, if you send F-16s to Ukraine, this is a red line. Well, guess what? F-16s are going to Ukraine here in the next few months. Probably by the end of the year, they'll have them. So think about that. This is a very serious war over here. And even though they're saying there's no more red lines, I mean, we are at a turning point here in this war in Ukraine. Ukraine's backpedaling right now and having to fight for every inch of territory to not lose it. And they're very low on ammunition and supplies, but they're still in this fight. All right. So think about what Dmitry Medvedev said here towards the French president. And obviously, these two are kind of battling it back and forth here in terms of fiery rhetoric. So let me know what you think down below. Comment down below your thoughts if you have any comments about this. And hope you got something out of this. If you did, please smash the like button. And also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in for this update. Everybody take care and God bless. We'll see you in the next one.